Good evening. With the Sunday interview for today, I'm Franklin Tembo Jr. as we discuss the energy crisis that has hit the country. The crisis in the energy sector has continued to affect the country's main production sectors. So much has been said by the government and critics on the matter, but where does the nation truly stand? Is there hope to recover from the current power deficit? Joining me on the set this evening is Energy Minister, Honorable Dora Siliya, who will be answering this and many questions on today's Sunday interview. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and it's good to see you. Hello to everybody at home.
The last time we spoke on this program, you were making decisions as to your political career. Allow me to congratulate you on your appointment. But has it come at a difficult time for you?
Well, for me personally, I can only say that I'm very, very humbled and grateful for the confidence that has been placed upon me. I don't take this appointment lightly. I know that it comes at a time when there's a lot of expectations from the citizens in terms of addressing the current crisis. And yes, it is a crisis, but I believe that any crisis provides an opportunity, as I've said many times, for leadership to emerge, for courage to emerge, for us to review processes and see how we can enhance them, how we can react faster and not be proactive. So clearly, I am very humbled, and I'm just grateful that there's a very great team in the Ministry of Energy and Water Development that I'm working with at this point in time.
You don't feel like you've been taken to the deep end?
Well, I think that I'm reminded, I've said this before, of the words of President Truman when he took office. He said to a group of journalists that if any of you prays, please pray for me now. But I believe that for us in this context, it's the whole country. We went to prayers on the 18th of October because President Lungu and many others saw it fit that sometimes when a nation is faced with challenges, especially like we were experiencing a very dry spell, it is good to get down on your knees and pray. And when one calls for prayer, it's not time to make committees and ask why, how, when, where. It is just good to get down and pray. And I'm very grateful that as I was driving down from Petauke today, I got to Rufunsa and I saw the downpour. And I said, thank God, the prayers have been heard. It rained, I think, in most parts of Lusaka today and along the greatest road where I was driving from Petauke. So it is a good thing, and we are very, very grateful to God that the rains have finally come.
You know that you've been circles that have criticized prayer for solutions to what should be practically provided by leadership, which in which you're involved. Your comment?
I read a very great quote recently by one of the candidates on the Republican Party in the U.S., I think Dr. Carson, and I can't quote it word by word, but I think he effectively says that whatever we do, whatever our own talents, at the end of the day, the most important thing is to thank God, because he's bigger than all of us. Now, you're talking about somebody who I believe is a neurosurgeon, this presidential candidate in the U.S. He still sees it fit to say at the end of the day, sometimes we do have to ask for God's help. So to many of us, it was only normal that the leadership of this country says, let's reaffirm once more our commitment as a Christian nation, but also that when you experience challenges, sometimes to reflect and move forward, you have to ask God, because, for example, it hasn't rained for quite a while until today. The rain season was poor last year. We've all seen the Victoria Falls almost completely dry. The water levels in the Kariba are very, very low. Now, surely President Lungu can't manufacture the rain, I don't believe that any opposition leader can manufacture the rain, but the rain affects all of us, not just in terms of electricity generation, but much more so for food security. I am happy that in my own constituency where I've come from, the food relief program is underway. But what we'd like is sustainable food security. And we do need rain to be able to do this. Even for irrigation, we do need to harvest rainwater. So not to belabor the point, I believe there are times when a nation has to be called to prayer, and the best thing that you can do is purely respond to that.
There have been, and this is a very hot matter because obviously it affects everybody. Some have argued it's not necessarily the low water levels in Lake Kariba, as many have argued to say it's lack of proper planning, future planning, because we were depending on a plan that, or development that were done by pre-independence, the pre-independence leadership, and we've depended on that all along. Would you say that that argument is valid, that perhaps we're in a comfort zone without really looking at the fact that the population was growing?
Let me say this, that I believe the time for the blame game is way over. I believe that where we find ourselves now is not so much a responsibility of one or group of individuals. I think that it's been as a result of successive administrations, and this is why it's very clear for me that it is definitely not the responsibility, as I've heard many people say, that it's just because the PF has been in government for years now, and that this is what has caused the load shedding. I think that is, I can't even find the right word to express it, because I think that we all know, one, that this country, the power is most of the majority of power generated in this country is hydro generated. Hydro meaning that it is water powered. Now, this is not the first time we've had a drought in this country. We've had one before. I think even in 1995 we saw, I believe, all-time low in terms of water levels. But the only difference now is that the demand for electricity is high. All things being equal, if it had rained properly last year and this year, we wouldn't be experiencing this problem. So clearly, the water levels are playing a big role. Investment, we could accept that, yes, it's true, there's not been investment in other sources of supply. But at the same time, investment doesn't happen overnight. Whether it is in hydropower or it is in other sources of investment, it doesn't happen overnight. And I think the whole country, we have to take responsibility, because in fact, even the whole country, what we've known for a long time is ZESCO, through hydro generation, supplies us power in our households, and that this power is as simple as switch on the switch. Now we have over 700,000 people in terms of power supply. Every month there are about 8,000 people who apply to have power to be supplied to their homes. We have businesses opening up all the time. We have houses being constructed all the time. I was on the Copper Belt last week. I saw in Twapia, in Lubuto, houses being built everywhere because the country is developing. I mean, one of the real determinants of development, you just have to look at how many cars are on the road, how many people are building houses. So the country is growing. Now, with all things being equal, if the rains were normal, we wouldn't feel this pressure.
But surely your technocrats should have known that hydropower wasn't going to sustain this growing demand. There are other renewable sources, other options that could have been going into perhaps implementation by now.
Hydropower is what will, for a long time, sustain this country in terms of electricity generation. In fact, this country is sitting on over a potential of over 6,000 megawatts, which would be able to export to the region and be a true exporter of electricity in the region. So we still have to exploit more hydropower with Batoka, with almost 2,000, with the exploration at the Devil's Gorge, with exploration in the northern part and especially Luapula province, where there's a potential of over 1,000 megawatts. Now, we just have to expedite the processes for people to invest in these hydropower stations. This will, for a long time, sustain the country. But with climatic change, we must always be conscious of the fact that it is possible that we could have a drought. So we have to be smart in terms of investment and vary the power supply, that it should not just come from hydro generation in times of lean years, in times of bad weather. It must also come from other sources, such as solar. Of course, in the world, there's a debate on solar farms, because solar farms take away a lot of land, and people do say it takes away from agriculture and then impedes on food security. Again, the solution is, for the way we see it, is not really big solar farms taking away land from the citizens for agriculture and other uses, but that there should be household solutions or establishment solution, industry solutions. For example, solar kits, as they do. I've seen it in South Africa. I know they do that in countries like Germany, that solar kits are available at household level with minimum investments. They're off-grid, because usually those big power plants, they provide the solar big farms, they provide solar power which is connected to the grid. But it is possible to have off-grid solutions where you see the panels on top of homes, on tops of companies. I saw a great example in South Africa where a company, they have connected to solar off-grid. They have the solar panels, but the solar panels outside are also serving as the garage for them to park their cars. So they have double usage. So I think this is the way we'll be going forward, even though initially we are exploring the idea of solar farms, solar plants, and we hope that very soon, by the end of next year, October, November, we'll have the first 200 megawatts from solar plants. But even before that, we hope that we can find some companies that are, and I have spoken to quite a number from Europe, from America, from and other countries that are talking about exporting to Zambia solar kits that are affordable for households, for businesses, to be able to have this individual solution, so to speak, which will be power off grid. But there's also a very important area of power supply maybe that we haven't explored yet. And I was happy talking to one of the key people in this sector, Professor Sinkala, I think just 2 days ago, who signed a memorandum of understanding with an American company called Bloom through an outgrower scheme with products such as cassava and others, that they want to truly explore biofuel. I think we have such a potential as a country to generate electricity, but at the same time support our farmers. So to me, I think that this crisis is real, but the most important thing that it provides an opportunity. What we must get away from, I believe, is alarming statements, is facts, is misquoting or rearranging rumors to try and make them look like facts. When we say there is no water in the rivers, it is because there is no water in the rivers. Who would want the whole country to be experiencing such electricity shortages? Because they impact on the economy, on productivity, on people's jobs, and no responsible government elected by the people would want to see the people are suffering. When we say, yes, there could have been maybe investment in other hydropower to complement what we have. For example, like Batoka, there was always commitment on behalf of government to explore Batoka. But because that has always been an asset owned by Zambia and Zimbabwe. There were issues there that needed to be settled. And I do recall that I think years back, when she was energy minister herself, Edith Nawakwe, I think that there were talks for Zambia to want to accelerate Batoka to complement Kariba. But there were issues there that Zambia had no control over, because if Batoka had been done then, we wouldn't have this problem as bad as it is now. Because even though the water levels are very low, the same water would have been used by the Batoka upstream, and then it would come down to Kariba and be reused. So we'll be using the same water, but generating double capacity. Every year, Zambia uses about 20 to 25 billion cubic meters of the water in a good year. Right now, we're getting to the levels where we are using close to just about 10 billion cubic meters. So you can see the difference in the availability of the water at the moment. And since it is hydropowered, it means that the more the water levels have gone down, the less we have to reduce the capacity to generate, because the water levels are low. So to me, those decisions were always there over time, but we couldn't do it because of the issues, the bilateral issues.
Right.
And
now,
of course, we have to accept that it's only now we are beginning to explore solar, and it's a new thing for all of us.
It is a new thing for everybody. But going back to what you touched on, and that is perhaps reinvestment in other hydro, power stations. Many will argue to say the ZESCO that you mentioned could probably have done better by now had politicians not been using it as what some has been calling it as a cash till, thereby crippling its potential to reinvest in its machinery, so to speak. Is that something that you would take as something that you have to avoid doing as people in power?
As I sit here, I can talk from experience of having been in government, having been out, and being back in government. Sometimes we talk about politicians as if they are not part of the society, like they're sitting on an island or up in the sky and they're watching everybody else in the country. Politicians are part of this society. They have families, they have professions, they have churches, they have political parties. We are part of this society.
But sometimes sometimes they get lost with the authority that they have.
Politicians only have the authority that has been given to them by the people. And this is why I think that we as Zambians have to make decisions going forward. And I think this crisis provides that opportunity for us. For example, a few years ago, it would have been extremely difficult to even think about the fact that we have to share cost in terms of generation of electricity. First, that government supplies this power through ZESCO, produced at about 13 to 14 cents a kilowatt. It is given to the citizen at about 5 cents a kilowatt. Now, even a marketeer knows that if they're buying tomatoes at 10 kwacha a basket, if they are going to sell it at 5 kwacha a basket, over time, they'll run out of the capital to reinvest. And that's a real issue that now this crisis is making us be able to have the political will to tell the citizens that this is the truth. And President Lungu took the lead when he went to Parliament and said to the citizens, we have to relook at this matter, because by continuing to just have government in this sector through ZESCO and subsidizing the citizens through government, what has happened is that this has made the pace of investment be slow. But government could share the cost, not just with the citizens, with the private sector who want to invest in this sector, so that government alone does not carry this burden. And if there are many players, business senses that the price then goes down. So then government is relieved of that burden to continue to subsidize by its own. On its own. And this is exactly what government is trying to do, to allow for investment by the private sector, especially in hydropower as well.
But they will not come with the current low tariffs, will they?
Exactly.
Hence the argument that perhaps, it should be considered that, we go to another level.
We looked in the region And after us looking in the region, we saw that we had to be competitive in the region. So because money in the world looks for where it's best to invest. And if we're going to be able to attract that investment so that over time citizens can enjoy cheap tariffs, we came up and suggested, and you heard the president talk about the tariff of about 10.35 cents per kilowatt. And clearly, we've begun to see now people wanting to come to invest. And once all this investment comes in hydropower, in solar, in biofuel, over time, we're going to see this tariff go down and become even more affordable because would have opened up and liberalized this sector.
Is there a risk that the PF government feels it may run if it considered hiking tariffs, considering that it may be an unpopular decision?
I think that we take the citizens for granted. The citizens want a service. This is what they want. For example, people pay for their phones. People spend a lot of money on phones. They pay for a service. And I think the citizens know that a service costs money. I think maybe it is sometimes ourselves, as you say, the politicians and the people in the media who believe that the citizens don't know what they want. The citizens want a service. What government's responsibility is to give the citizens the service they need at the best price. Now, clearly, for a long time, we have been masking investment in the electricity sector. And what we are saying, because government has been the biggest player for a long time and subsidizing for a long time. So what we are saying now is that we share this cost, especially with the private sector, so that ultimately the citizens will get a service, first of all, and the right price.
Right.
Because what the citizens want is what the welder in Chirilawombwe, in Kalingalinga is looking for is that they have power at the right price and they can do their business.
Right. So can you clearly tell the citizens what to expect in order for this current situation to really normalize? What are we saying in this current situation that we're in where tariffs are low? Is it possible to dream or think that it will be back to normal again? What should happen? What is going to happen?
This is what is going to happen. First, there are immediate decisions that government has made because there is a crisis. And we saw that by August, September, the crisis was at its highest because the water levels in the rivers in Kariba especially, had gone so low that we knew that would experience load shedding at such a massive level, maybe even up to 15 hours. And government immediately made a decision to begin to import power. So we began to import power from Mozambique. That was the first thing government did, knowing that it is at a great cost, knowing that we'll have to take money from somewhere to pay for this power coming from abroad, from Mozambique. But the decision had to be made to ensure that those who have small businesses, those who have big businesses can continue to operate at certain levels without having to close down. Because if the power was going to 15 hours, clearly there would be no business happening. So government made that decision and reacted very quickly and began to import power from the 3rd of September at an extremely great cost to this country. I think we're paying about almost $13.1 million every month just for that power being imported. At the same time, the ZESCO power being able to cover the cost that the citizens are not being able to pay for, because if ZESCO is generating the power at 13 cents a kilowatt, the citizens get it at about 5 cents per kilowatt. So government is importing power, $13.1 million a month, but at the same time has the responsibility to say we continue to subsidize our citizens.
So subsidy is the problem here?
No, I think there are multi-problems. So I'm trying to give you the steps that have been taken. So first was to import power. And thereafter, we began to have the conversation after the president's speech in Parliament that we need to have a very honest conversation about what happens in the energy sector now for us to attract investment. I think ZESCO then went back and made proposals. And I think these proposals have gone through public hearings. I think they were advertised through the regulator, the Energy Regulation Board. And I will wait to hear, as Minister, the recommendations that have been made by the public, by ZESCO, and ultimately by the ERB. And I will wait for those recommendations.
Right. You're on record as having said that Zambians should brace themselves for increased load shedding next year. Again, going back to the fact that Zambia is in a crisis. Are you saying then that even if it rains, it would take, a long time for electricity supply to get back to normal?
Well, the experts say if we have normal rains, it would obviously take about 3 years for the Kariba to get back to the required levels. Now, knowing that, having that information, what have we done? One, I said we already began to import power. Anticipating that by the end of this year, even if it has begun to rain, as we've seen in some parts of Zambia today, it does not mean that tomorrow the Kariba will be full. So we initiated plans already in October that we should have what we call inland generation in the country. That is that a number of power plants, fuel-powered plants, diesel-powered plants, some of them, I believe, even kerosene-powered plants, will be established, I think, in 2 in the Copper Belt, 2 in Lusaka, and 1 in Northwestern Province, so that they begin now to provide some extra 200 to 300 megawatts. We are also just finished arrangements through ZESCO with another company to import power again through Mozambique on a ship that will be docked for a year in Mozambique to supply power, to connect through the interconnector in Mozambique to supply power to Zambia. And also through the Mozambican utility company, because Mozambique is the only country in the region there's an 8,000 megawatt deficit in the region. The only country that seems to have power is Mozambique. That seems to be in a better position. So we'll also import another 150 megawatts from Mozambique. We're having those discussions. We hope to conclude them soon. So that's what government has done. And at the same time, we have said, well, there's this hydro, there's these importations, there'll be fuel-powered plants. Let's now explore also solar. So we're hoping by the end of this month, as I had stated earlier on when I met stakeholders, that we are going to give away about 4 or 5 licenses to solar promoters so that they establish these solar plants, and we can hope to get at least by end of October next year, because I believe it takes about 6 to 9 months to set up these solar plants. So we're hoping that by then we can also get an extra 200 megawatts from solar. And I'm hoping that by then even some biofuel would have come online. So we have planned for the crisis. I think that is what you do. We can't change the weather pattern. Nobody has control over it, not the PF government, not the opposition, and not any citizens, because rain is a function of God. He's the one who knows when the rain will come. We can only anticipate from history and expertise and scientific expertise, but having that information, we have taken those steps to ensure that the country's economy is supported. And I know that all my colleagues in government are alive to the fact that electricity is a very important factor of production, of supporting the economy. And I think all of us are working very hard to ensure that these decisions are implemented, these plans become a reality, so that we mitigate against the expected deficit and we can maintain the current levels of power supply. What
about this, the suggestions that are coming from other stakeholders who may not necessarily be in government, some of whom may be critical of the way that you're running the affairs? And you also had a stakeholders meeting. Are you listening to what they're saying? If so, what is the outcome of first that meeting, and what do you make of what is being thrown on your table regards alternatives?
There are 2 issues. First, with the promoters of other sources of energy. We know there's a power deficit. We know there's a demand for power, especially in the mines, in business. We know that there's business opportunity in the energy sector. So the question is really, why isn't it happening? Now, our view has been, if it is government processes, how can we expedite these government processes to ensure that those that say they want to be involved in the solar business, we allow them to be to set up these plants. And as a result, I have made sure that in the ministry with my colleagues, we speak to everybody who has a role to play in making sure that these licenses, these implementation agreements, the power purchase agreements become a reality. So whether it is the ZPPA, it is the Attorney General's office, it is my colleagues in the Ministry of Finance, I think we've all been talking to each other, it is IDC, that we must make this happen. You know, we can't just keep talking. We know the country needs the power, so we can't just keep talking. And I am quite happy at the pace we have worked and to ensure that these processes, the rules, the laws, whatever, are followed, but that they can be shortened. Because in an emergency, I keep saying, you have to do things differently. You have to make decisions differently. Your thought processes have to be different. Your actions, most of all, must show that you recognize that this is a crisis. So I have said to my colleagues, the Zambians know there's a problem. All the Zambians are expecting is that we maintain the status quo and hope that we improve it. They don't want it to get any worse. And at the same time, the Zambians, what they expect from government is that we provide hope that we're doing something about more power to be put into the system. So this is what I have been doing, talking with stakeholders in Lusaka, and I even went to the Copper Belt, and the Copper Belt specifically because of the mine issue as well. We know that the mines, just like the government, just like the people of Zambia, are suffering double tragedy in the sense that we have seen the prices of copper at an all-time low. Now, while fuel prices are also at an all-time low, and since Zambia is not an oil country, when oil prices are low, we should be happy. But then the gains from low oil prices are being eroded by low copper prices, meaning that government is the revenue it used to earn before has been eroded. The revenue it would earn from copper to be able to procure fuel, to be able to pay for electricity, to be able to pay for drugs in hospitals, to build schools, to build roads, that revenue is being eroded. At the same time, even the mines, their revenue is being eroded. That's why government's revenue is being eroded. It means that the mines now have faced a challenge of the labor force. Now, the whole problem is even exacerbated by the deficit in power, because you'd hope that because the low price, the copper prices are low, they'd want to produce even more volumes to compensate for the low copper prices. But then they're not even able to do that because of the shortage of power supply. And this is why, for me, this crisis, as we keep calling it, is something that is affecting every citizen, not just government, citizens, opposition leaders, the church, everybody in Zambia, businesses, small businesses, big businesses. I think at no time have we been called to be patriotic. And I think I repeat that this is not the time for alarming statements, for alarmist statements. This is the time to build confidence and stability. Because when you have a crisis, what you want is stability to continue to attract investment, because that's what we need more at this time. It is investment not just in the energy sector, in all sectors. And I'm happy that from my experience in the ministry the last 1 month, clearly Zambia is still a favored investment destination. People have come in numbers to my office from all over the world that they would like to invest. But I think it's ourselves who sometimes send out such alarming statements as if the country is not good for investment. But we forget it is the people with jobs in the mines. It is the people with small businesses. It is people, Zambian citizens, who suffer in the end if we don't get this investment.
Right. Honorable, let me take you, as we come to the close of this interview, let's talk a bit briefly about the Kiba Dam. There was a directive, actually, from the Zambezi River Authority that Zambia and Zimbabwe, cut generation in March this year. But the rule was not immediate. The rule was not immediately, or the directive was not immediately implemented, and it was found that power generation was 760 megawatts instead of 500 megawatts. So clearly going against what was advised. So this strain on the dam's capacity must have consequences in the future. Does this reflect, you talk so much about how people care and worried about this whole scenario, but this kind of reflects ignoring an authority on a matter it is best suited to advise on?
Look, clearly, over the years, both Zambia and Zimbabwe have worked very clearly with the Zambezi River Authority, which manages the water basins that provide the water for generation. And clearly, it was recognized this year that because of the need in Zambia and Zimbabwe, both countries had gone over the allocated water usage, but they were asked to load shed, so to speak, in terms of power generation, and both countries did. Zambia went from, I think, between January and March to load shed almost the first time. I think it was almost about 400 megawatts that was load shed, and now we're expecting to go further, another 300 megawatts by December, and that is because of the constant dialogue that we have with the Zambezi River Authority. I myself, I have met with them to understand the situation because they're also responsible for the actual dam war itself, where the two governments again are procuring, working with the World Bank, the EU, and the African Development Bank, procuring expertise to deal with issues of the war. But I think that the countries have always been within limit, and it is the job of the authority to say, oh, Zambia, you've gone off your water usage by 5%, 10% cut back, Zimbabwe. I think that is normal, going back and forth. I think this year is just that it is a unique year because of this extreme drought in terms of low water levels that we've experienced. And this is why even a little offshoot in terms of water usage seems to be, I mean, it is actually a big issue, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And I think this is why the two countries have been responsible enough to say, yes, we are going to cut back the load, supply. And this cutting back of the load is what now extends becomes load shedding in our homes. Right. Because when the Zambezi River Authority said there's not enough water, they cut back the production, the generation, and that means if we cut back in the homes, it becomes load shedding. Right. But I am confident that government and myself as minister, that we're doing everything possible, if not at least to maintain the status quo, to even improve by providing supply from other sources, importation, inland generation, solar, and hopefully from biofuel as soon as possible.
Let's very quickly talk about the government's capacity to help fund some of the power stations under construction. Where is the government in terms of supporting or financing some of these projects very quickly?
In the long term, we have to look at how we are going to finance supply electricity generation in this country. I think that's an important question. And in the medium to long term, we have to look at long-term answers. In the middle of all this stands ZESCO. The Zambians have to make a decision what role they would like ZESCO to play. But at the same time, how are we going to fund generation? We have big hydropower plants, but we also have a lot of small ones, 20, 30 megawatts and below, especially in northern part of Zambia, which could be supported by the private sector. We've already seen the private sector in some of them. I think it's a responsibility of government to encourage a lot of private sector investment so that we share the cost and ultimately the citizens will get a better service. This This is why in solar, it is the private sector we are seeing. In fact, in terms of the projects that the ministry is directly looking at in solar, we've said government is not going to spend money on any of them because we have to serve the citizens from any more challenges, wondering where will the money come from in terms of investment. So what we have said is that those private sector, those businesses, promoters of solar, that say they have the resources, we are very happy to give them a license, to agree the terms with them, and just make it possible for ZESCO to have that power on the grid so that we serve the citizens better, instead of waiting and saying until government will have money to invest. In that way, I think we are serving the citizens better, because we are trying to avoid a situation where load shedding should become worse by saying, let's give the private sector. If they have the money, then we are serving government. We are serving the citizens. The government can then use the money it has for other things, for rehabilitating the grid, for investment, even in other sectors outside energy, because citizens always have needs for health, for education, for roads. So if we can save the opportunity cost instead of us committing resources to solar, the citizens, the private sector have come forward from all over the world, from Zambia, and they have said, we can do this. Our job is to make it possible for them to do it. All I can say is that there's an opportunity here for Zambians too to participate and create wealth. Yes, there are some things that could have been done 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 10 years ago, but I think the time for the blame game is over. This is the time for all of us to find solutions, to be a bit more patriotic as citizens, and say, let's move forward. And all the Zambians want is hope. What the Zambians want to hear is that somebody is addressing the problem and provide hope. And that's what myself and my government are doing.
Honorable Minister, I'm afraid we'll have to end it there. Thank you so much for coming on to Sunday Interview, and the very best of luck as you deal with this crisis.
Just make sure, please, you switch off all the appliances that you're not using and the lights, so that on the demand side too, we can save power. It's extremely important.
That's Energy Minister's last words, Honorable Dora Siliya, as we look at the energy crisis in the country. And from what has been said, it does look like it is a crisis that calls for every stakeholder's participation. It's not going to be easy, but solutions have to be found. I'm Franklin Tembo Jr. Thanks for watching Sunday Interview. Until next time.